Episode 44, Cost, Risk, Concepts, and Ranges, we face a reality that every project eventually meets at the bank. Costs move. They move because markets swing, people learn, suppliers negotiate, and schedules breathe. Treating cost as a single point is like treating weather as a single temperature. It ignores the fronts and pressure systems that shape the day. Our aim is to replace anxiety with structure. When you see what drives variation, you can plan for it, influence it, and communicate it without drama. Credible ranges earn trust because they explain why a dollar today may not be a dollar tomorrow. Start by breaking total cost into clear, intelligible components: labor, materials, equipment, services, licenses, logistics, and overhead often behave differently and deserve their own lines. This decomposition transforms a large, opaque sum into a set of understandable levers. It also invites the right experts into each conversation, rather than asking one person to estimate everything. A good rule is to keep components meaningful but not microscopic. If a line item never drives a decision, it belongs in a roll-up. If it frequently surprises you, it deserves a name, an owner, and a range. Map each component to its specific drivers before assigning ranges. Labor depends on skills, productivity, and availability. Materials depend on commodity indices, supplier capacity, and quality yields. Services depend on scope clarity, travel patterns, and approval cycles. When you connect lines to drivers, you discover which pieces are controllable and which are mostly external. That distinction guides attention. It also warns against overconfidence. Many organizations are excellent at quantifying what they control and forget to bound what markets control. Naming the drivers makes both visible and turns a vague budget into a story with characters and causes. Distinguish price volatility from usage variance. Price volatility occurs when the unit price moves while the quantity stays steady, as when steel or cloud compute rates shift. Usage variance occurs when the quantity moves while the unit price stays steady, as when rework inflates labor hours or design changes add test cycles. These two forces may coexist, but they are not the same, and they demand different mitigations. You hedge volatility with contracts, indexed clauses, or alternates. You tame usage with clarity, standards, and reviews. Blending them into one guess hides the levers you could pull. Classify exposures as fixed, variable, or contingent. Fixed costs arrive regardless of output, like a site lease or a license minimum. Variable costs scale with activity, such as per hour labor or per unit material. Contingent costs are conditional, like expedited freight that only triggers if a milestone slips, or warranty remediation that triggers if performance falls short. These categories help leaders understand which risks scale naturally and which risks appear suddenly. They also shape reserves. A smart reserve covers the plausible spread of variable items and the triggers that convert contingent items from risk to spend. Give every major component a range rather than a target. For labor, consider a credible low when the team is staffed with experienced practitioners, a central case that reflects realistic productivity, and a high when learning curves bite or context switching steals hours. For materials, think about supplier tier, minimum order quantities, and scrap rates. For services, reflect on scope maturity and approval cadence, since delays often convert into billable time. Ranges turn uncertainty from a shadow into an outline. They invite discussion of how to land near the low and avoid drifting toward the high. Keep ranges honest by linking them to observable conditions. A labor range narrows if you have named people, signed agreements, and a known backlog. It widens if you anticipate turnover or unusual clearance requirements. Materials narrow when alternates are qualified and quality yields are stable. They widen when a single vendor holds the capability. Services narrow when the scope is codified and fixed deliverables are used. They widen when the work is exploratory. By tying the width of the range to facts, you transform debate into inspection. People stop arguing opinions and start testing conditions. Do not ignore currency and inflation. A domestic contract insulated from exchange rates behaves differently than a multi-country supply chain paid in foreign currency. Modest inflation compounds over long schedules and erodes buying power quietly. Create a simple practice for indexing future payments to a public measure and specify who bears that movement. If exchange exposure is material, consider natural hedges, prepayments, or currency bands inside contracts. The point is not to eliminate macro forces. It is to decide in advance how they will be handled, so a headline does not become a budget crisis. Treat vendor change orders as a first-class risk driver. Many projects start with defensible base pricing, then drift upward through scope clarifications, tolerances, and approval delays that vendors rightly bill. The best defense is a mature definition of done and early alignment on what constitutes a change. The next best defense is cycle time discipline for reviews, because slow responses often convert into vendor idle time or resequencing fees. Track the causes of change orders and address them systemically. When the team sees the pattern, it stops paying for the same lesson twice. Remember the quiet costs: taxes, duties, and logistics. Landed cost is not just the item, it is the journey. Import classifications, port congestion, inland freight, and storage minimums can swing totals more than expected. Even domestic projects feel logistics through fuel surcharges, access restrictions, and delivery windows that require premium handling. Put a knowledgeable voice in the room when scoping these items and give them a named line. Surprises shrink when someone feels responsible for this terrain and has permission to negotiate terms that keep the path clear and the price predictable. Tie cost risks to schedule shifts because time and money are rarely independent. A 2-week slip can add rental days, extended staff, seasonal price changes, or missed discount windows. Conversely, an aggressive pull-in may require overtime, premium freight, or parallel work that increases scrap. Walk your schedule and mark where time converts into cost. Then, state the trigger points that change spend behavior, such as the day a discount expires or the date a storage contract activates. This turns calendar risk into dollars you can plan for and defend. Express totals as range envelopes rather than single numbers. An envelope shows the plausible low and high for the portfolio and highlights which components drive the width. It can also show confidence bands, such as where you have 70% comfort of landing given today's conditions. This view resists the temptation to hide uncertainty in decimal places. It invites an honest conversation about trade space. Leaders can then ask which decisions could narrow the envelope and which choices would widen it. The envelope becomes a living artifact that improves as decisions remove uncertainty. Focus on high-leverage mitigations first. These are actions that narrow big ranges or reduce correlated exposures with modest effort. Examples include qualifying a second supplier for a unique part, freezing a volatile interface to cut rework, or agreeing to unit price bands that share upside and downside fairly. Often, design choices dominate leverage. Standardizing a component, relaxing a tolerance, or aligning a test fixture across teams can remove an entire source of usage variance. If a mitigation does not move the envelope, it is activity, not impact. Chase the moves that change the shape. Decide reserve size and governance with the same clarity. A reserve is not a slush pile. It is pre-approved risk capacity held for specified causes. Size it to cover the spread of likely variation, not the worst imaginable world, and link drawdowns to documented events that match your drivers. Establish who approves releases, how replenishment is considered, and what evidence is required. Track consumption against causes, not just totals, so learning returns to planning. Reserves earn respect when they are transparent, triggered by facts, and discussed without blame. Communicate affordability and trade-offs in the language of choices, not fear. Offer a committed cost with defined conditions, a stretch cost that assumes successful mitigations, and a stressed cost that names the risks you would need to accept. Tie each to scope, quality, and time so leaders see the full picture. People can accept a higher number when they understand the value it buys or the risk it removes. They struggle with numbers that feel arbitrary. Your job is to make the budget a story with reasons, not a number with nerves. Credible ranges earn trust because they respect uncertainty while showing how to influence it. Break the total into parts you can see, tie each part to drivers you can manage, and keep an honest record of what moves and why. Connect time to money, make reserves explicit, and speak through envelopes rather than false precision. When stakeholders see that care, they stop bracing for surprises and start participating in solutions. That is the quiet victory of sound cost risk practice. It turns budgets from fragile promises into shared, resilient plans. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.